I realized that it's not the most genius or the most creative folks that are the most successful. It's the ones that execute the best. And executing on a plan is something that falls, directly in line with, not only the military in general, but especially the infantry that I was in. So once you realize that, you do have the same skill sets as other successful entrepreneurs, just by what's either been beaten into you or that you learned, willingly.
Yeah.
But, you spend a number of years in the military, you know how to execute. So that was a huge realization for me once I got into the space. Now it's figuring out how to best execute.
Yeah, and taking action for us civilians. Execute is because some people go, "What's execute?" Well, it's taking action. It's
Hmm.
just a military term. I love that you said that because I watch Shark Tank, haven't in a while,
Hmm.
but there's some products and services out there like just unbelievable. But they go, "You didn't execute it right. You're asking for too much money. You're talk about that when it comes to taking the action, executing. What's the first couple steps they need to do properly?"
Well, so I look at it from two different ways. Whenever, and let's go back to a military
Mhm.
analogy. Whenever you're going into a room that could possibly have bad guys in it, do you go right or left? Well, the only wrong decision is no decision at all. So you can sometimes it's more detrimental to make no decision than just picking a direction. So whenever you look at folks that have this great product or this great service, sometimes they just don't do anything, or they do so very little that it's just as good as not doing anything. So one thing that I've really had to focus on was short-term goals, long-term goals. Are the long-term goals achievable? Are the short-term goals executing towards the long-term goal? Because you can just throw numbers out like I want to do $1 million in revenue in 2025. Okay, well, what are the steps between here and there? What are you doing today, this week, this month? Uh, so that's what I have found for me, because I have to live and die by my calendar, because if it's not on the calendar or if it's not on my to-do list, like it goes right out the window. And then I really realize a month down the road, oh, holy cow, I forgot to do this. Or
Yeah.
so I'm a big believer in short-term execution, journeying towards long-term goals.
I love that because the $1 million is really a dream. If you're
Mhm.
making 50,000 a year in 2024 and you're going to go to a million, that's your dream. It may not put a time frame on it, but what's your goal? Okay, I want to double my income next year, so I want to go to 100,000, or whatever that number is. I like that, and I like the action about no action, because I
Mhm.
tell people all the time, making the wrong action, you can pivot. You
Mhm.
take no action, and podcast hosts are a perfect example. I've talked to many guys I've helped. It's been months they haven't started their podcast. Well, who could they have, what could have happened in those months? Take action. I love it. Talk about leadership because, it's talked about everywhere, but in the military, it's a unique experience.
Well, I got kind of a crash course in it because I was a 22-year-old staff sergeant. So
Mm.
I joined the Army at 18, made sergeant at 20, and then staff sergeant at 22. So I was in charge of an 11-man infantry squad in West Baghdad at the age of, 22, 23, 24.
Mm.
So, baptism by fire is one way to go about it. But one thing that the best advice that I got as a private in the Army was, for the rest of your career, you're going to have poor leadership and you're going to have fantastic leadership. Always make note of each so that you can add that to, how you grow into, the leader that you're going to be. Keep all of those good things to heart to know that you need to absolutely do those and how they'll positively affect everybody in your team or squad. And then never forget the bad leadership. So as soon as you start seeing yourself becoming something similar to that, to hard stop.
One of the things that I see a lot of people praising military for, but let me tell you that entrepreneurship and self-employment is not all that it's cut out, as they say, right? It's not all nice rosy roads with bank accounts full and all of that. So what made you decide to go from getting a paycheck to having to go hunt and get your own paycheck?
So there are a couple inflection points, and I with this thought line, I'm either going to get some praise from some salespeople or I'm going to get some hate from some salespeople. And it was as I was working at a large staffing and recruiting firm, and it was as I was about to turn 40. And right about this time in 2002, the staffing and recruiting industry was kind of falling apart. Tech sector was doing all the layoffs. Everybody was kind of scrambling. You know, the requirements to stay on board as a salesperson. When you have somebody ask you to make 100 cold calls a day, like that, like that's a young man's game. I'm out. Or just for that reason right there. I'm not a great cold caller. I've never earned any business from a cold call, and that was one of the big pushes for me to just say, like, I know that I'm capable of running a great book of business, and I think it's time for me to do it on my own. The other part of it was a large driver of seeing folks that were high earners that were, being treated to, the president's club or president's circle, and all of these things for earning over $1 million in gross profit or something like that. And then you think back to it and you're just like, man, like with the way the commission rates run, you're just giving away $800,000 or $900,000 to the house. Like you're making some CEO that you've never met super rich and richer every single year. So it's like, why don't I just take on all of this risk myself? I'm already doing the exact same things that I would be doing if I owned my own business. And this way I'm not giving away 80 or 90% to the house. And that's between those two things, those are the driving factors. Because as a salesperson, you're responsible for your pipeline, you're responsible for managing clients. And, I just came to the realization that the compensation rates, the commission rates are absolutely preposterous, not only within this industry, but within a lot of industries. And I liken it to similarities that the real estate world had, probably 10 years ago, whenever every brokerage was running 50-50 split commissions. And then all of a sudden people started, there started to be a movement to offering a 75-25, then 80-20, and then 90. And that, so it started to create that change. But I wasn't going to wait for that change. It was like, I love staffing and recruiting. I think this is great. This is what I want to do. And I can do it a lot better than what the industry standard is from an operations standpoint and from a compensation standpoint. And as soon as I launched my staffing business, with the big differences that I had whenever I launched was, the commission splits were going to be much higher. So instead of the house taking 80% or 90%, the house is only taking 20%, and you're giving 40% to recruiters and 40% to sales. That's 5 to 10 times what any other firm is giving recruiters or salespeople. And also just being able to let folks work without non-competes or without restrictions. It's just like all these different operational things that I thought were pretty crappy in the industry. I just flipped them into creating a company that would be perfect, that I would want to work for. And that's exactly what I did. Now, that all sounds great, but I also launched a staffing and recruiting firm in the worst economic climate for our industry in like the last decade. But it's okay, because I'm very much so a trial by fire type of guy. And, I would much rather have a really tough first 6 months versus a kind of easy first 6 months, and then having to try and build off of that into the future. But those were the driving factors. I also kind of knew I wanted to own my own business. I just didn't know with specifically what industry. I didn't want to own a marketing firm. I didn't want to own an advertising agency. I didn't want to try and start up any of these things with industries that I had worked in prior. But once I got into corporate staffing and recruiting, I knew after being in the business for 2 years, I was like, oh, this is it. Like, this is something that I can do. We're going to be really great at it. And by having a much more open, network and relationship based partner ops plan, I'm now able to work with some of the best recruiters in the country that are also their own business owners. And we're able to create a much stronger network of small businesses that are easily able to outcompete other small and medium-sized agencies. So kind of having that innovative comp plan and that innovative ops plan were absolute game changers right from the start. There wasn't what I could find a strong element of folks out there that would coach with veteran-owned small businesses and plug them into the commercial space. Everybody wanted to kind of push you into the government space where there's set asides for veteran-owned small businesses and SDVOSBs and things like that. So it seems like a path of least resistance, but that's not where I had spent my career. I wanted to be in the Fortune 500. I wanted to be in the mid-market. So I kind of had to figure all this stuff out for myself. And after a year and a half, I got my staffing firm to be an approved vendor at over 75 Fortune 500 companies. So that's a cool cocktail story. You know, I'm not doing business with all 75 Fortune 500 companies because I'd be taking this call from an island. But talking to other veteran-owned small business owners, you know, they'd say, "Holy cow, give me your playbook, you know, coach me, advise me." So I realized that there was not a coaching. There was a void to be filled within the coaching space of grabbing vet biz, helping them get their government certs, whether it be SBA, state, or third party, and then having them leverage that and plug them into the Fortune 500 like I did.
They can spend it on anything. They just have to spend it with there's a certain percentage of those types of companies they have to spend money with.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the set asides there. So it's like what I tell folks is, you know, there's three main avenues for getting the benefits of getting your small business administration certification for being a veteran-owned small business or a service disabled veteran-owned small business.
What percentage rating do you have to be service disabled?
10%.
Oh shit! Right.
So just any service connection disability, and there's three main benefits for that. The first one is the obvious GovCon work because there are set asides. Right now, I'm attached to a prime bidder as a sub on a $1.2 billion IT contract over the next 5 years that they're bidding on because they needed an SDVOSB staffing firm. And they reached out to me because I was already in the database. I've got some partnerships for putting bids on HR consultancy, pretty much anything within the coaching or consultancy space. There's a need for it, and it all just depends on your codes. So all the
okay. So I'm hiring a grant writer. We'll pay 20% commission off any grant y'all win me. There we go.
There you go.
that actually exists. You can do that.
Yeah. So that's the GovCon route, which, you know, in all transparency, I haven't had a lot of success in the GovCon space. That's a whole nother podcast on why. But again, I've never been in the government space. I've only been in the commercial space, which is where I've had my all of my growth on the staffing side. So you also have the route that I'm going, the SMB, mid-market, and Fortune 500, because the same way that there are set asides in the government space, there's also initiatives in the corporate space. Yep. So JP Morgan Chase is setting aside, I don't know, X amount of $1 billion to spend specifically on small businesses. That's women, minority, LGBT, veteran, all kind of under the same umbrella. They're not held to the same legal constraints as you are in a government space, but they're like, yeah, we're going to try.
But what did they delegate the money for? I mean, it's just a cool education.
So I was on a webinar with the executive director for one of the main airlines, and they say, we buy everything but the plane. If you have products, we'll want to buy your products. If you have services, we'll want to buy your services. So I'm a vendor for a handful of major airlines on the staffing side. So it's basically, finding out what companies already procure your goods and services. On the government space, coaching and consulting, 100%. There's tons of them out there. Now, if you have a pressure washing business, that may be more aimed towards state and local government contracting versus Fortune 500 application.